To understand the differences between dragonflies and regular flies, you must also begin to understand the fundamentals of insect flight. For this video, I've broken up the topic into 3 main categories. Let's jump right in. Number 1. History of insect flight and wing types. It is thought that insects evolved flight some 300 to 350 million years ago. However, there remains some debate as to how it exactly arose in the insects. It appears relatively abruptly in the fossil record, with few if any intermediary fossils to show a direct progression. These days, there are basically 2 schools of thought. The first being that wings came from extensions of the thorax, called paranodal lobes, that became repurposed for the task of first gliding and then flight. The second is that the structures that were repurposed were actually gills, as today, the most primitive insect groups that have wings, being the dragonflies and mayflies, are both semi-aquatic. However, most experts lead towards the first theory, as with the structure that is used to help a tree-climbing insect glide, it's generally easier to see the linear transition between that and a wing, rather than a gill and a wing. Wings as we see them today are only attached to the insect thorax and connecting musculature. And the thorax of the insect is kind of its locomotion center, that's separate from its head and abdomen. The topic remains up for discussion and currently unsolved in scientific literature. But regardless of how insects got their wings, when they got them, it quite literally made them the most diverse and arguably successful animal group on land. Flight allows for rapid escape, the ability to disperse widely, and both expedites and improves the mating process through ease of access, as well as helping to keep the gene pool diverse and thus healthy. Animals that hybridize with those from different regions often obtain newfound resistances against dangerous pests and pathogens faster than if they were just a local population. This is what flight helps to achieve. Now, let's get specific with how wings evolved. But before I do that, let me establish one key principle. Approximately 0 species of insect grow more than 1 set of wings during their lifetime, since the tough or hard part of the insect is on the outside and not the inside. Due to them having an exoskeleton rather than an endoskeleton, they grow by molting. That is, they crack the old exoskeleton, escape from it soft and malleable, and then their body will harden, growing a new exoskeleton every time they want to grow a little. Thus far, this intensive process has only proven to be able to develop wings 1 time, in the final adult molt, meaning that when you see an insect and it has wings, it's in the last stage of its life. They only manage to do it once because the process has to be both precise and fixed, simply because flight itself requires fixed precision. They can't just grow more wings. The only insect that kind of flirts with being an exception are the mayflies, who do indeed molt 1 additional time, that is a subimago to imago stage, but when they do that, they molt only the rest of their bodies and not the wings specifically. That being said, let's get into the history of flight in insects that are still alive today. And the oldest among all insects that still possess flight are the dragonflies and the mayflies. Dragonflies have what's called direct flight. And what this means is that dragonflies have wings that are directly attached to the flight muscles in the thorax. Each wing can be moved independently, like you were waggling your fingers. It evolved this way to allow precise maneuvering and hovering, which is useful for predation and avoiding predators. It was also likely the first form of flight ever on Earth for any animal group. Direct flight gave more agility and speed, making aerial hunting and rapid escape possible, and it's the most controlled form of flight likely possible, which is why every adaptation since has just been a refinement or a reallocation of features towards other specializations and niches. In other words, dragonflies perfected and have the most controlled flight among all insects, and this is likely why they're the oldest group that even has wings. But after dragonflies came folded wings and indirect flight, which is what pretty much every insect today has, save for mayflies and dragonflies. Insect flight adapted two key refinements after direct flight, which both lowered control but improved versatility and metabolic efficiency. First is that they transitioned from direct to indirect flight. And what this means is that the muscles are no longer directly attached to the wings. Instead, the insect deforms and vibrates the thorax with muscles very quickly, and this indirectly vibrates and flaps the wings. The second adaptation is that now wings could also fold over the body, allowing for more behaviorally rich and stealthy lifestyles, as the wing structures could now adapt in a practical way to features unrelated to flight. And most importantly, it protects them from damage while they're not flying, as flight is an extremely useful but also fragile ability. Basically, folding wings increases survivability and adaptive flexibility without compromising the capability of flight, but it does hamper raw control over flight that's seen in dragonflies and mayflies. Now, as insect wings and flight continued to refine themselves, new features emerged, such as tegmina. These essentially replace the forewings and become leathery, thickened coverings for the hind wings, and they've evolved multiple times in different groups, such as grasshoppers, mantids, earwigs, and stick insects. Remember, the majority of insects have at least 4 structures on their thorax. Even when not all of those 4 things are wings, they all serve a complementary purpose for the goal of flight. But generally, every insect that has wings today evolved from a 4-winged ancestor. Basically, tegmina create protection against abrasion and predation, while retaining functional hindwings for flight. They help with stability and can even be used to produce sound in crickets and grasshoppers, but they are essentially just soft wing coverings that lower flight control but improve flight safety. Now, all these traits I've listed are basically found in insects with incomplete metamorphosis. But in insects, the advent of complete metamorphosis allowed insects to evolve many new traits. And let me explain the difference between these two metamorphosis methods before I explain their implications for flight. Basically, the difference is what the young insect looks like, that is the baby or nymph or larva. In incomplete metamorphosis, the baby just looks like a younger version of the adult, whereas with complete metamorphosis, the baby looks like a larva or grub or caterpillar, and the adult can look completely different. Only insects with complete metamorphosis go through a pupal stage, so larva, pupa or cocoon, adult, whereas incomplete metamorphosis just goes from different nymph instars into adult. Flies, butterflies, beetles, wasps, bees, and ants all have complete metamorphosis, and this has had huge implications for flight. This is because complete metamorphosis allows the adult stage, that is the winged stage, to be far more robust and niche specific, meaning that wings in insects with complete metamorphosis could suddenly become far more specialized. This doesn't necessarily mean that they can match the dragonfly. Indeed, no insect other than dragonflies and mayflies are known to have direct flight muscles, but it does mean that the insect can allocate more resources to very complex wing specialization, and they do. So let's get into the novel adaptations that formed as a result of the efficient resource distribution of complete metamorphosis. And you typically won't find any of these in insects with incomplete metamorphosis. The first holometabolic trait is found in bees, ants, and wasps. What it is are hamuli, which are tiny hooks on the hind wing that latch onto the forewing. This can make both sides of the body effectively have a single wing surface, and the wings can unhook so that the insect can still fold the wings over its back. Basically, this improves flight efficiency for hovering, rapid acceleration, and carrying things like pollen or spiders. This provides better maneuverability for navigating flowers, nests, or tight spaces. Joined wings maximize thrust and stability, and it's especially important for these insects because ants, bees, and wasps rely on parental care, which usually takes specific tasks being performed which require these wings specialized for this purpose. The second trait are the elytra of beetles. Basically what's happened here is that the forewings have evolved into rigid protective shields, kind of enhanced tegmina, which completely cover the membranous hindwings. This evolved to protect the hindwings and the dorsal body while burrowing or walking through rough environments. These maximize protection while still allowing the insect to retain the ability to fly. Essentially, it takes the two most important reasons flight exists for insects, which are dispersal and reproduction, and maximizes efficiency while minimizing risk, which is likely how beetles became the most species-rich group on the planet. They invest in protecting the insect's most dominant trait, flight. The third complete metamorphosis trait are scaled wings. These are found in butterflies and moths, and basically the wings are covered in microscopic scales. These scales provide color for camouflage, mating, warning, and improving aerodynamics. It adds a multifunctionality of purposes to the wings: protection, signaling, and flight efficiency. And it even likely helps them get out of spider webs because the scales are kind of loose, so if the butterfly flies into a sticky web, the scales can just come out and it can fly away. Many butterflies and moths have forgone the ability to fold their wings so that their wings can be larger for greater communication and thrust. They have poor flight control and are bad at hovering, but the larger surface area allows them to glide rather quickly and efficiently. The last trait comes from the order Diptera, which contains the flies. And something to understand: flies only have two wings, and the hind wings have been reduced to small gyroscopic organs called halteres. Halteres act as balance sensors, allowing for precise and agile flight. As you're going to learn soon, flies require precise maneuverability because their two wings actually make it a little more difficult to control where they're going if they don't know where they're going. So the halteres provide tremendous maneuverability and stability feedback in flight, allowing them to outperform insects with 4 full wings in aerial agility. Twisted wing parasites in the order Strepsiptera have these too, but they are in the forewings rather than the hind wings, whereas in all flies it's the hind wings that have become the halteres. Now, essentially, all of these traits don't put dragonflies out of the picture. Dragonflies are still the best flyers. But flies get the most bang for their buck, that is, ability versus practicality. Hymenoptera, the ants, bees, and wasps, have the best wings for hovering and performing tasks. Beetles have the worst flight, but the most defensive, and moths and butterflies have specific colors and patterns which synergize with the plants that they feed on, and very broad wings for metabolically efficient travel. But I digress. Let's get to point number 2. That is the aerodynamics of insect flight. In order to understand insect flight, we should first understand some fundamental aerodynamics. First is the property of lift. To be able to fly against gravity in a surrounding environment full of air, an object has to actively displace the air at a certain rate, in a certain way. This is often explained using Bernoulli's principle, which states that if air moves faster over the top of a wing than the bottom, the pressure on top drops, creating a pressure difference that effectively lifts the wing upward. The key factor here is the speed of the airflow. This principle is why, for example, when a stock car crashes and starts moving sideways at high speed, it can act like a plane's wing and lift off the ground. Air above the car is being displaced faster than air below it. For insects, Bernoulli's principle is actually harder to achieve, even accounting for equal speeds, because of the scale insects operate at. On a plane, bird, or bat, the wing is typically large enough for the animal to glide, relying mostly on the raw displacement of air. But as you shrink down, what are called Reynolds numbers come into play. These measure the ratio of inertial to viscous forces in a fluid. And basically at the insect scale, they measure how thick the air is, or at least how it behaves. At the insect scale, the thickness of the air makes it harder to generate lift through speed alone. Because of this, for insects, the way, that is the technique, they push against the air matters. To achieve lift, insects have to flap their wings extremely quickly, far quicker than birds or bats. And not only this, they have to flap them in a specific way. As the wing flaps, it rotates, kind of like how a kayaker might push a paddle through the water. And this little technique creates what are called vortices. You know how when the kayaker moves the paddle, little swirls of water appear around it? Those are the vortices, and they are created when something viscous like water or air is trying to fill in a space that was just displaced. It happens because air or water is coming in from all directions, and the spinning motion comes from the fact that that's just the fastest way to equalize, that is, fill the displacement. In air, this spinning has an added effect. If you create a vortex in the right position, it basically creates a pocket of displaced air. And as we stated earlier, if you are below displaced air, you get sucked upwards. Insects can create these vortices by flapping in a specific rotational way, which provides additional lift through extra displacement. You may have heard the old quote that bees should be unable to fly. And the reason scientists thought this was because they had not accounted for wing beat technique and the vortices insects are able to generate. Basically, every insect with wings today relies on vortices. And it's why when you watch insects begin to flap their wings in slow-mo flight videos, they are often going straight up before they lean into a direction, as the vortices lifts them directly up before they can choose where they want to fall, whereas a bird or a plane goes up at a more acute angle. Now the second concept to understand is drag. Drag is the resistant force opposing motion through the air. You know how when you move faster and faster on a roller coaster, the air starts pushing against your face faster? That's drag, and it scales quadratically with speed. It comes in two main types: parasitic drag, which is caused by the shape and friction of the thing moving through the air, and induced drag, which is a byproduct of generating lift, that is, flapping wings. In insect flight, insects have high drag due to small flapping wings and low Reynolds numbers, so their wings are moving too quick in air that's too thick. Flapping at high frequencies partially offsets drag by producing small, constant bursts of lift through the vortices. Dragonflies are a bit bigger, and they minimize drag by flapping their fore and hind wings out of phase with each other. This reduces the interference between the vortices created by each wing, which in turn reduces overall drag. As a result, it makes dragonflies categorically more efficient at generating lift, which wouldn't be possible with indirect flight. The dragonfly and damselfly are essentially doing breaststroke in the air with two sets of arms moving in two different sequences, and they are the only insects known to be able to do this. Smaller insects have an extremely high wing beat frequency with a small amplitude, that is low Reynolds numbers. That means they're relying more on very fast wing beats and the creation of powerful vortices, and this becomes more important the smaller you go. At a certain point, when you're small enough, you tend to rely only on vortices, which can create these bizarre micro insects which use a clap and fling style of flight. This is because the Reynolds numbers are so low that even just the creation of the vortices is enough, and the speed at which they're created doesn't matter so much. Morphological utility and the dragonfly versus the fly. As I said before, the dragonfly is undoubtedly the best flyer. With 4 wings it can directly control, and each wing having independent muscles, it allows it to pretty much do whatever it wants in 3D space, and take full advantage of the vortices as they minimize drag. But understand, there's raw efficiency and then there's practicality for a niche. Direct flight is metabolically superior, faster, and does more with less. But in certain contexts, it's not the most maneuverable. That award goes to the flies. Let me explain. Dragonflies are better at controlling where they are going to go, but the 2-winged gyroscopic flies are better at controlling where they're already going. Dragonflies excel at intentional trajectory control, whereas flies excel at instantaneous trajectory correction. But what types of naturalized behavior is this better for? Well, the dragonfly is an expert hunter, more often than not of flies. It's faster and can intercept the fly in midair, but it often can't do this to a fly that is large and fast enough, because many flies can maneuver away at just the last second. Flies that hunt in midair are better at catching insects that try to escape, as well as better at escaping confrontations themselves. In other words, maneuverability. Dragonflies, in contrast, are simply the most powerful flyers, in both speed and intention of the wing beat. The fly has a slower path, but it can swerve faster if it reacts quick enough. Dragonflies can generate more lift thanks to their large, independently flapping wings, while flies achieve greater drag avoidance, particularly during rapid maneuvers and sharp turns, due to their smaller size, higher wing beat frequency, and more efficient vortex exploitation. 2 wings are actually better for vortex and drag avoidance than 4, even if those 4 can flap asynchronously, like in dragonflies. Not to mention, the fly's reaction time makes them experience the world about 6 times slower than a human, which dragonflies can do too, as they've co-evolved a predator-prey relationship. The dragonfly has evolved to catch the fly, which they more often than not do, but still certain flies are big and strong enough that they can catch a dragonfly off guard and score a kill. But remember, most flies are not predatory. I'm referring specifically to the robber flies. This is fundamentally a battle of flight paths, and in the effort, dragonflies are kind of like F1 cars, and flies are like stock cars. If they're battling in a parking lot, one can absolutely catch the other, but at a certain point it comes down to a reaction time, which not all flies have, and not all dragonflies have, making this an exceptionally fascinating and variable field of study. Now, dragonflies mostly hunt nematoceran or longhorn flies, which have weaker flight and reaction times. This is the group that has mosquitoes, crane flies, gnats, midges, and the like. And dragonflies have a much harder time trying to catch houseflies, deer flies, fruit flies, and yes, robber flies. But it still happens. And in my opinion of equal-sized insects, I would say maybe robber flies actually have the upper hand. But that's just my opinion. Insect flight is perhaps the most profound adaptation in the group. It's a key way we like to categorize them, as nearly every order has its name ending in terra, which is Latin for winged, and indeed more insects possess wings than do not. It is fascinating to note that dragonflies are indeed the oldest winged insects among us, and also fill a niche that has yet to be matched from an aerodynamic perspective. Every insect since applies flight to newer and more innovative purposes. It's an endless myriad of speciation potential, even to the point where they surpass the dragonfly in certain key aspects of flight, such as defense, hovering, signaling, or maneuverability. But still, the dragonfly's niche remains, and it's the only insect that has the necessary musculature to be as fast and dominant as a hunter as it is. Truly a marvel of nature. Thanks for watching this episode of Privilege Bug Facts. Stay tuned for more bug content just like this. Thanks.